We're on. Okay.
Yeah, we're on. Welcome, everyone.
It's been a busy week
Man.
for multiple reasons. And I think we get straight into it. Actually, before we do get straight into it, as people tune in, and people are tuning in, send us a message. Let us know. Let us know that you're watching. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, we'd love to read those, interact with you in real time. That'd be great. You can do that if you're watching on YouTube. Go ahead and leave a comment. We'll see that. If you're watching on Facebook, on either of the groups, send us a message. Leave a comment because we will see that. Now, on Facebook, if it's coming from a private group, and they are, then we won't be able to see your name. But that's okay. We love to know that you're listening, and we love to know if you have any questions or comments. So by all means, leave a comment and let us know that you have tuned in.
That's right. And one more thing on that, Jono, if they are coming from a Facebook group, if they don't see their name, if we don't see their name, maybe they could just say, hey, this is John from, whatever. That way we'll know. We'll know if they're coming from Facebook or whatever. But
yeah. So we're using, what are we using? Restream, and that's just the way that
Restream, we see it all.
Which is great. I'm loving this.
We see it all.
I'm loving this this platform. All right, so the big news, of course, and this is what we started off with last fortnight, is that your book has been caning along. It's doing really, really well. It's been at number one on Amazon. It's a number one bestseller in new releases, and for a couple of weeks now. And g'day, Ray. Ray's there.
Ray.
And I got a couple of copies. I gave one to Alistair, the Hebrew teacher, friend of mine at the library where I study, and he thought it was great. He said, "I love the way that this just fits in the pocket." He said, "This is brilliant for my students." He said, "It's really good." He loves the way that it's set out, but it's designed specifically so that you can just carry it around in your bag. You can put it in your pocket. It's just real easy. And who's that? Dave. G'day, Dave.
Hey,
We're
Dave.
gonna catch up. It's been too long. Lee and Pam.
Hello.
Hey. So now the way that it's set out, of course, is that it gives you the most frequent Hebrew words in the Tanakh, so that you can learn them. You can learn. Hey, Patty. You can learn the most frequent first. Is the way it kicks off. And in doing so, you very, very quickly master a great deal of the content of the Tanakh, and it's just a very efficient way of learning. Timothy Thompson, g'day, mate. Looking forward to seeing you. And who's that? Sylvia. Hey.
Yeah, Sarah. Hey, Sarah. How you doing?
All right, Timothy. We're going to catch up in Israel and Jordan very, very soon. Actually, before we continue with the book, Ross, let's just talk about that real briefly. Right. We're very, very close. We've got 5 weeks now or something before we're in Israel.
It's coming up.
It's coming up real soon. Now, listen, if you're thinking about coming, get cracking and place your deposits. There is still time and there is still space on both tours, both the Israel tour and the Jordan tour. You can do that. Oh, look, there's the link just below, tanaktours.com. And you can join Timothy Thompson. G'day, mate, and us on both tours. It's going to be really good, and I'm really looking forward to it, and especially Jordan. So much of the Torah narrative occurs on that side of the river. It occurs in Jordan. We're going to be there, and we're going to see it. Just so much of the Mosaic narrative, Ross.
You realize we're less than a month, Jono. We're less than a month before Well, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to be there in a month. I'm going to be going with Dr. Tabor. We're going to do the Tabor Nichols tour, and then I'll be there at the airport when you guys come in, and we'll just have a hi-ho time. But it's still coming. It's a month and 10 days, right? I mean, it's coming up.
What's really cool? I'm really looking forward to this. Is that the Israel tour begins on the 3rd of November. Bunch of people, and this just seems to be Tanakh tour tradition. Bunch of people are arriving early. I think the vast majority of the tour are arriving early and meeting up with us. And we're just going to do some pre-tour stuff before we have our bus. So we're going to be in Jerusalem. We're kicking off in Jerusalem this year. We usually kick off in Tel Aviv, but it's so much more appropriate to be in Jerusalem
at the Prima King, by the way.
Yeah, at a very good price. My goodness. and we're going to be there. And like I say, there's so much to do in Jerusalem that it's impossible to do. Even in a week, you need months really to tick all the boxes. But everything within walking distance, we're going to be doing a whole lot of stuff with people that are arriving early. So it's real value for money. And if you're watching now and you want to come on an Israel tour, it's not just the tour. If you arrive a couple of days early, you get to do a whole lot of stuff for free. It's just the cost of accommodation and food for you. On the 1st and 2nd of November, Ross and I are very happy to just take you around and show you all the stuff that we don't usually get to even on the Tanakh tour. We're going to make the most of those 2 days before the tour actually kicks off, and then we can utilize the bus and go all over the place. So I'm really looking forward to that, Ross. And it's only 5 weeks away before it begins, and there is still room on both tours. If you decide to do both, you'll get a $100 combination discount, by the way. And many, many people are doing both. All right, back to the book.
Yeah,
there it is. If you haven't ordered it yet, you need to get one. There's no excuse. It's so ridiculously cheap. What is it? Only $14?
$14 US. Yeah. And I thought that was fair, and just quickly, I have like 7 different Hebrew vocabulary books, and they talk about necessity as the father of invention or mother of invention or whatever.
Necessity is the mother of invention. So true.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that I wanted it laid out a certain way for me, and I just decided why not put this up. And of course, we had Daniel Wright design the cover, and real pleased with.
Happy birthday, Daniel Wright.
That's right. It's actually, he just turned 64.
64.
That's right. We sang him a song, so he's very happy.
Good for him. All right, so where is he? Daniel, that you're watching, you should be watching. Come on.
I hope he is. Let's see. I would be really disappointed, sorely disappointed.
We're going to have to find another illustrator if he's not on already.
No, we won't.
Right. What else is news? Did you put the link there, by the way, for people who have not yet got the book?
I can do that.
Yeah, do that, because go to Amazon, and I'm pretty sure, last I checked, it's still number 1 in new releases after 2 weeks of being released. It's doing really well, and that has to do primarily, I think, for 2, well, maybe 3 reasons. Maybe because the cover is so great.
The cover, don't judge a book by cover, but in the case of Daniel Wright's job,
Daniel Wright always gets it right. Yeah. So it's the cover, but it's also the size. I mean, it's just such a convenient book, but also it is the way that it is set out. As I said, it's going to maximize your effort. You're going to get the most return for your effort studying and memorizing these words this way. You learn the most frequent words first, and it catapults you into your biblical Hebrew vocabulary.
One other point, Jono, is that my schedule, our schedule is really tight between now and our trip to Israel. But I'm planning whenever we get back, December, hopefully in December, even as early as December. We get back right after Thanksgiving, or right before Thanksgiving, actually. But after the holidays, I plan to start a 5-week, 1 hour, 1 night per week for 5 weeks, a class on just the basics, like how do you form syllables and words, and that way that puts a person, all they need to do, you're not reading before a board here for any kind of certification, but just give you the familiarity so that then they can jump right in, begin to learn the most frequently used words. So that's what we plan to do, and I'll keep people posted on that.
You'll keep us posted. Okay. Very good. Another reason why this week has been full of fireworks is because we had the religious police set upon us. How about that?
We really did. It
happens from time to time.
Yeah. And I think that there are people, sincere as they might be, give the benefit, they think, a lot of times people think they're doing the work of heaven or whatever. But why would anybody pick on me or you? I mean, I'll tell you what. You're
far too gracious, Ross. I'll tell you why. These people are insecure. They see that you have a target. They see that you're taking people to Israel. They look at that and they go, well, you must be making money out of that. That should be my money. And you think differently to me. Oh, I'm going to attack you. And they parachute down into They're just insecure and nothing, but they parachute down into a thread on Facebook or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden fly with the false accusations, which they did. And it began with one particular person whose name we won't even mention. I've forgotten his name, actually. So, and he is very forgettable. But he he parachutes into it and starts telling you and accusing you of I don't know, being part of a different religion. What was his accusations?
I don't even remember, but let's suffice it to say that I do have one view that prevails over everything else. No matter what topic I get into, my view is always, and this might surprise you, Jono, it comes from Pirkei Avot, and it says, "Be of the disciples of Aaron." I like this, loving peace and pursuing peace and teaching all men the Torah. So I've always kind of had this approach that, whether somebody thinks I'm a disciple of Aaron, but I love the saying in Pirkei Avot. Sure. I don't really have time to engage with people who disagree. And I welcome criticism. People are welcome to say, I don't like Ross. I don't like his hair or his shirt or his theology. And usually that doesn't bother me because I stay busy, And so what I wish, this is going to sound kind of corny, but I wish people could just get along. If someone doesn't like me, go do your own thing. So that's really my approach. So I don't engage. And basically what I ultimately did was just, I gave a fair warning that, people can criticize, they can like me, they can love me, they can leave me. But if someone is consistently mean or hateful or derogatory, you ultimately you just have to let them go. So that's what I did. So we're happy again. I didn't lose. Maybe I should have, but I'll be honest, Jono, I slept like a baby. Yes. So I'm ready. I'm ready.
So Dave said most people need to work on themselves, not point at other people, especially when they go, and you're absolutely right, Dave, especially when they go looking for a fight and they think that you're a soft target, right? And it really is incredible.
Why do you call me a soft target, though? I want to move on.
Because you're such a nice guy.
Okay, I thought you meant like I'm a softie and see a old army guy.
No, you're not. No, you're absolutely not. But from a distance, this guy thinks, right, because you're a nice guy and you're very gracious and you're very diplomatic, he looks at you and he goes, I think he puffs himself up and beats his little chest and parachutes in and decides that he's going to, make mincemeat of you, which, of course, you and I don't have any problem with engaging with people who want to challenge us. In fact, we welcome that. If you want to enter into a discussion, and indeed a debate with us, by all means, and challenge us, and let's have a discussion and a debate.
Civil.
No problem.
I like civil, particularly among people of the book. Yes. So I have people. I love a lot of people who have theological views that are far different than mine. And we still have a good, wholesome relationship because we have mutual respect for one another. And so my view is always, don't engage in something that's just ugly or nasty or ad hominem where I'm making fun of someone and they're making fun of me. I don't even know these people, for instance. So again, I always give the benefit. I always try to be, as you say, gracious and say, bottom line is I would rather devote my time and energy towards something which draws people to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to the scriptures that we all love, and try to live our life accordingly, as best we can. We try to seek out the ways of heaven, and I do like to debate, honestly do. But again, I'm going to sound like a Talmudic sage here, but it's this idea that any debate which ultimately points to and benefits the kingdom of heaven is worthy. But anything which causes strife or discord, like I don't go to someone else's religious gathering and nail things to the door or,
especially if you're not invited. I mean, if you're not part of come on. Marianne, g'day, Marianne. Marianne said, I learn something every time I listen to you two. Looking forward to the time spent with you now. Well, we're happy to have you, Marianne.
We are. Welcome. So, all right, Jono, you about ready?
I'm about ready. I think so. There was one other thing I was going to add to that. And I don't know what it was. It'll come back to me, but it's all good. Anyway, we blocked them.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
that function. I very rarely use it on Facebook.
I don't hardly ever do it, but if someone is particularly nasty to my friends, I mean, I'm a big boy. I mentioned my military service. I've had people, pretty tough people, hollering in my face, and that kind of trains you up for sticks and stones will break my bone. I don't. Whatever somebody thinks is whatever they think. That's fine.
Yeah,
But
but we
particularly
don't
if
have
they're
the
ugly, if they're ugly to other people, there's just, particularly if you say I'm a Bible person. So anyway,
yeah.
I'm
And we don't
done
have the
talking.
hours. We don't have the hours to waste on silly comments and false
Yeah, we're
accusations.
writing books and leading tours and teaching
Yeah,
Bible.
we've got lots to do. And clearly, these people have not paid attention to anything that we've been doing of late. If they had, they'd be far more alarmed, Ross, but they haven't.
Right.
Anyway,
That's
so
right.
they're gone. All right. So where are we up to?
I'll tell you, we have discussed this for a few weeks, and other things come up, and we've talked about this idea, and I know a lot of people are familiar with something like this. We're going to go through some things associated with what is commonly referred to as generational curses, or something where basically, if a father sins, is that transferred to a subsequent generation or generations?
Mm-hmm.
And there are some biblical texts that actually seem to suggest that. And so we, the two of us, have been talking about this offline for some time.
Yeah.
And you have particularly, well, we'll go through some biblical verses first to set the groundwork, but then you have noticed some things and come up with an interesting take on this particular sin, if you will, but even more specifically, as it is presented in the Moses scroll. Is that
In the
right?
Moses scroll, absolutely. So,
Yeah.
and before I jump into that, I'm just going to address something that Timothy said. Let me see. Timothy just asked you, are you going to be doing an audio version of the book for Amazon? I'm not sure if if it's in reference to the Moses scroll or your vocabulary book. But
Yeah, I see. That would be a good idea. Both of those. Uh,
yeah,
I bet he's talking about the Hebrew, because if someone would go through it, now the benefit of me doing it is you would get a little bit of Cajun, kosher Cajun, with a little bit of Louisiana in. It might
mm-hmm.
even be better if someone that doesn't have the Louisiana accent does it. I don't know. But we are going to go through a lot of these words when we do the classes. So we'll take the examples.
Yep. Excellent.
Yeah, we'll bring up some of the words directly from the book and show how it relates.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Tabor and I talked about it this week, and he said, if let's say you take Genesis 1 through 3, because it's such a classic text, everyone is familiar with it, and I think if you take something that people are familiar with, you show them how the words in the book appear in those opening chapters. Find a way to tie the words in the book to the text. It's a good idea. So I think I'm going to take a little bit of time and coordinate and organize those classes so that you get a direct correlation of those.
We'll
two.
keep people up to date on that. Okay, so you said the word book. G'day, Timothy. So, all right, now this is called as you mentioned, transgenerational curses, or what's the other? There's another term for it as well, vicarious punishment.
Right.
And thanks to Mark Brettler, who is the commentator of study notes in the Jewish Study Bible, which is really great. I mean, the translation.
You had an exchange with him this last week, did you not?
No, I had a brief exchange with Joshua Berman.
Okay, that's who it was.
Berman of Beilan University, and we'll talk about that some other time. But fascinating chapters in a book called Inconsistencies in Torah. We'll get back to that. Okay, so the reason why we looked at this, and we've been looking at this for a while, is because when over a couple of years ago, when we first got into the Moses scroll, it was I don't know how to describe this, Ross. Would it be fair to say that it was uncomfortable to see that the representation, initially, as we thought, that the representation of vicarious punishment or transgenerational curses appeared also in the Moses scroll? Would that be fair?
I think so. I think because we had some challenging questions and discussions, which we'll cover in a few minutes,
Yeah.
that we hoped were taken care of. Maybe
Yes.
Is that
And the reason for that is because so often, over and over again, the Moses scrolls solved problems that have for millennia been debated, certainly for centuries, been debated in the Torah, in the five books of Moses in the Pentateuch.
Yeah.
There are inconsistencies, if you like to use Joshua Berman's word. There are inconsistencies, perhaps even perceived contradictions, problematic theologically and philosophically, that are often debated by scholars. And what we wanted to do, and I was very keen to get into, was to look at all of these objections and all of these things that are commonly debated, problems that clearly exist and still exist and are debated even today, and see if those problems still applied to the Moses scroll. Now, I shared some of these at the United Israel Conference back in May,
Mm-hmm.
April, May?
April, yeah.
April. And you'll find that on United Israel YouTube page. You can listen to some of that there. But and I was just blown away, and that was the title of my talk, was things that blow my mind about the Moses scroll, that it consistently solved the problems, which I love, and it should, if indeed it is what it claims to be, which is a copy of the scroll of the Torah of Moses.
Yeah.
But when it came to the transgenerational curses or vicarious punishment, it seemed initially that was still represented within the Decalogue. All right, so I'm going to get into that. It appears,
but you're not going to solve that. You're not doing the Moses scroll yet, are you? Are you?
Not yet. Let's have a look at how it is represented first, just to remind everybody where this is in the Decalogue of Deuteronomy and Exodus. And by the way, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Ross, but I think that it is identical in both texts. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so this is one example where it is identical. There are differences, obviously, between the two in the Decalogue, and some of them are significant. But here, there is agreement. What it says is, it's basically the first or the second commandment, depending on which way you count them, because as we've mentioned before, in the 10 commandments of Exodus and Deuteronomy, there's actually only 9 commandments. Either you split the first or you split the last to make 10, and different traditions do that. So it may be that you think it's the first commandment or the second commandment. Anyway, it's the commandment, it's the prohibition against idolatry. And at the end of the prohibition of idolatry, can I call it a caveat, Ross?
Yeah, and when you're ready, I'll read it. I have it open. I'm waiting on you.
Go ahead. Go ahead and read the caveat.
Just so people know where we're coming from. This is the version in Exodus chapter 20, verses 5 and 6. You shall not worship them nor serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, inflicting the punishment of the fathers on the children, on the third and the fourth generations of those who hate me, but showing favor to thousands to those who love me and keep my commandments. Now, that's the New American Standard.
I was about to ask you. I wondered what translation. So the New American Standard, you're telling me, says inflicting the punishment upon.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
And now the interesting, we can get into some of the issues with the translation, but this is generally the way it's understood. I wanted to read one of the translations that conveys the way this is typically interpreted. So the way it's typically interpreted, obviously, from the way this sounds, is that if you worship other gods, And because God is jealous, because he's passionate, because he's zealous, he is going to inflict punishment of the fathers on the children, third and fourth generation. So the idea is that if, God forbid, I were to worship other gods or bow down and serve other gods or serve an idol or something of that nature, this so infuriates the passionate God that not only am I in trouble, but my son and my son's son, because of something I did. Now, a lot of people get that and then they skip over the next part that says, but showing favor to the thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. And some translations even say to the 1,000th generation. So the question is, let's use that now. Let's think about that. Does this imply that if I'm a good boy and I don't worship other gods and serve idols, etc., that not only am I in the good, but so will the thousands who follow me? Well, nobody really thinks about that. Because what if my kids are, typical, as they say, preachers' kids? They're not. It doesn't go right.
G'day, Dave Cole.
Hey, Dave.
Job. Thanks, Dave. So Dave just said Job, and it's quite timely because in Job 21, verses 19 to 21, Job says, "What's this about?" Let me read you that that verse. Okay, it says, "Eloah this is the word for God that he uses. Eloah stores up the iniquity of the wicked for his sons. Let him repay the wicked so that he himself will experience it. Let his own eyes see his destruction. Let him drink the cup of the wrath of Shaddai. For what does he care about the house he leaves behind when his allotted months come to an end?" So what Job seems to be saying is, what do you mean God stores up the wicked for his sons? It seems like he's replying, by the way, to his companions, if I can call them his companions, because
who needs enemies if you have friends like that, right?
Yeah, right. So, and his friends are saying to him on a couple of occasions something to that effect. So it's probable that that Job is replying to them and saying, "You say this, but what? That doesn't make sense. Let God punish the one who has sinned, so that he may experience the wrath of God for his own sin. Because what does he care about the house that he leaves behind when his life comes to an end?" So it's a problem even with Job. He's debating it, going, "This just doesn't seem right." It reminds me actually of Abraham in what is it, chapter? Let me just see here. When he says, pending the destruction of 1825. "Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked are treated alike.
Right.
Far be it from you, shall not the judge of the earth deal justly?"
Very powerful verse. Shall not the judge of all the earth. And you're bringing up passages, and Dave suggested this in Job as well. Is it, even in the ancient world, in the biblical text, there's this inner strife about, is that really the way this works, that one person sins and it passes on? I mean, so you have an internal debate within the text. Is that fair? You have both views.
Yeah.
Evidently, Job's friends thought, yeah.
Well, let me just, I'll highlight. There are actually, so there's 4 passages. You've just read one of them. And the other one, of course, as we already mentioned, is represented in Deuteronomy. The prohibition against idolatry is identical, except for in the caveat here that you just read, there's a vav added, which represents the word "and." It says in Deuteronomy, "I, Jehovah, thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity," and the word visiting we can talk about, but visiting the iniquity of fathers upon sons, and upon the third, and upon the fourth generation of those who hate me. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal, except for the rabbinic explanation. When you mentioned in the past recently that the explanation as to why there are 2 different accounts, that is to say that the Decalogue in both Exodus and Deuteronomy have significant differences in some parts. Their explanation is, oh, well, God spoke both of them at the same time.
Right.
Solved. Problem solved. But if he spoke both of them at the same time, right, which I find far from satisfying, if in one version he did not pronounce the verb, he didn't say and in another in the other version at the same time he did say and, then why do we have one without? Because if you speak them both at the same time, you're going to hear the and you know what I mean? It's just silly. But that is the difference there. Numbers chapter 14, verse 18. Jehovah is slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, forgiving iniquity and transgression, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, upon the third and upon the fourth generation. Exodus chapter 34, verses 6 to 7, embellishes it even further. And Jehovah passed by before him and proclaimed, Jehovah, Jehovah, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abundant in loving kindness and truth, keeping loving kindness for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, and that will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and upon the children's children, upon the third and upon the fourth generation. There's no question, really, what these texts are trying to say, and that is that transgenerational retribution or vicarious punishment is a thing, according to these texts. So now you mentioned that there are contradictions, and of course that's absolutely right. There are those 4 in favor, and then there are 4 against. And the first that we see is in Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 9 and 10, which explicitly limits divine retribution to the individual, Ross. So it says, know therefore that the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God, who keeps his covenant and his faithfulness to 1,000 generations for those who love him and keep his commandments, but he repays those who hate him to their faces to eliminate them. He will not hesitate toward him who hates him. He will repay him to his face.
Yeah.
Again, talking about the individual and not about successive generations. But further on in Deuteronomy, and we see in Deuteronomy 24, verse 16, it makes it even more clearer. The fathers shall not be put to death for the sons, neither shall sons be put to death for the fathers. Every man shall be put to death for his own sin. Again, specific to the individual. But not only that, you can't get someone else to pay for your sin, nor will someone else, nor will it be required of them to do so. Jeremiah 31, 29 to 30.
Wait, while you're on that, Jono, a couple of passages, that Deuteronomy 24, 16, you also have 2 Kings 14, 6 and 2 Chronicles 25, 4 are actually telling of an event where a king knows this idea, remember?
That's right.
And
tell us about that,
yeah, I was just going to bring those 2 passages up. It just says, and but the king had read in the Torah where it says,
it makes reference back to that. Yeah,
that's right.
Quite right.
So I just wanted to add that in there.
Oh, good.
And one other thing before you go to the prophets, there's a passage in Exodus 32, and let's see what I have, verse 31, I believe. Moses returns to the Lord and said, oh, this people's committed a great sin. This is following the golden calf thing. And they've made a god of gold for themselves. But now, if you'll forgive their sin, very well. But if not, please wipe me from.
Oh, he's frozen.
Said to Moses, whoever sinned against me, I will wipe him out of my book. So it's sort of the same thing. It's sort of saying, no, the one that commits the crime, that's where the punishment goes. Let's not confuse this. Let's not put it on someone else, right?
No, very good. Yeah. And so there is this friction between these texts, and there's been, as I mentioned, centuries of debate as to how this is supposed to work out. Before I go further, Dave said, and mothers, is it fathers and mothers? It really seems these verses, the first 4 that I mentioned in favor of vicarious punishment is, I guess, culturally dealing with fathers and sons.
At least that's the way it focuses, so.
It's the word, it's the word that it uses.
Mm-hmm.
Before I go further, someone just said, "Hey, I ordered the book on Saturday. I'm going to get it on Saturday." That's great. Well done. And someone else on Facebook says, "Shalom." And Marianne just said, is quoting the proverb.
Right. That's right.
Parents eat sour grapes and their children's teeth are set on edge. And quite right. So that is Jeremiah 31:29-30. That says, "In those days they shall say no more." So this is speaking about a future event. In those days this will be remedied, because they're quoting this proverb and it's not right. The proverb is, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge, but everyone shall die for his own iniquity. Every man that eats sour grapes, his teeth shall be set on edge. Ezekiel 18.
Wait, stop. 1 second, Jono.
Go ahead.
What's interesting about that, and where it appears in the text, Jeremiah 31:29-30, is immediately after this idea of this proverb about how the children's teeth are, the fathers eat sour grapes, children's teeth are set on edge. Immediately after that, it says, "Behold, I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah," etc. Many people in their theology, they think that the new covenant is about one other person paying for the sins of someone else. But it's interesting that right before you read about the new covenant in Jeremiah 31, you get this passage that says, "Not so."
That's right.
So anyway, so that's just a side point.
That's worth highlighting. Absolutely. Yeah. So Ezekiel chapter 18 goes into great detail to elaborate, to illustrate, I suppose, the claim of Deuteronomy 24:17, and it furthers, the idea that this particular proverb that's being quoted, that Jeremiah says in the future will no longer be quoted. It takes that and God says through the prophet, let's see, "What do you mean by repeating this proverb concerning the land of Israel, that the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge? As I live, declares the Lord God, this proverb shall no more be used by you in Israel. Behold, all souls are mine. The soul of the Father as well as the soul of the Son is mine. The soul who sins shall die." So I can imagine, Ross, when Ezekiel claimed this to the people, that the people would be scratching their heads and saying, but the first commandment, Ezekiel, the first commandment, did not Jehovah tell us that he visits the iniquity of the fathers upon the sons to the third and fourth generation?
Yeah.
What's going on here? But both Jeremiah and Ezekiel, God is claiming through the prophets that no longer shall you quote this. It's not the way it works. So which is it? And it demands solutions. And again, over the centuries, over millennia, there's been attempts to solve this contradiction. I spent quite a while reading ancient Jewish sources that try to solve this. And there's a number of them. There's a number of solutions, and one contradicts the other, and so on and so forth. I could read them all to you, but some of them honestly just are painful to delve into. But Sanhedrin 27b attempts to clarify the dilemma by adding information that would incriminate the successive generations as equally guilty as the father who first fell into sin. So what it's saying is, I'll quote it. It says, there the verse is referring to, and this is in relation to Exodus chapter 20, verse 5. There the verse is referring to a situation where the children adopt the actions of their ancestors as their own. If they do not behave like their ancestors, well, then they won't be punished for their ancestors' sin. All right, well and good.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with that,
by the way, that matches what we read in Ezekiel. You get all these examples. Let's say the daddy is decent and his kids are bad, or let's say the dad's bad and the kids are decent. Is that gonna? And he clarifies point by point all these different views. And so you're saying that the rabbis here are suggesting that very view, which Ezekiel puts forward in chapter 18 and to some degree 33.
And I think this is the best that they can do with it. I think this is the best explanation, the fairest explanation, considering the texts that are before them, is to say, well, no, really, it doesn't say it explicitly, but really what it means is that if the successive generations follow in that sin, they too will suffer the consequences of that sin. But really what they're saying is the soul that sins shall die. So then the fact that the caveat of the first commandment mentions the sons to the third and the fourth generation, that becomes redundant. Why mention that at all if clearly this particular sin has repercussions? Well, then it has repercussions. There's no need to say, and if the son does it, he'll also be in trouble. Oh, and if the grandson does it, he'll be. And if the great grandson does it, also it'll also have. It applies to everybody. So why it just becomes a redundant claim? But it is the best that they can do with it. Now, to be fair, when we came to the Moses scroll, the way that it is worded in the Moses scroll, and we'll get to that, we won't read it just yet, that was the best I could do with it as well. Separating it from the text that we read in Exodus and Deuteronomy. In fact, that was what I think it came up in the Q&A after the presentation at the conference, and that was the explanation that I gave, was something similar to Sanhedrin 27b. There are other explanations. I'll give you one. And Micah 24a states that Moses said, quote, Moses said, he visits the transgressions of the fathers upon the sons, quoting, in this case, Exodus 34, verse 7. Ezekiel came and revoked it, Ross.
Revoked it.
The soul that sins shall die, and not the children of that soul. So in this case, Micah 24a is saying, yeah, this is what it says in Exodus 34. This is what Moses said in Exodus 34. This is what he said in Exodus chapter 20. He says this in Deuteronomy chapter 5. This is what he says. Of course he said that, but don't worry, because Ezekiel came and revoked Moses. He overrode Moses. And really what that is saying is that God said one thing and then another. If we're to understand that God spoke through Moses and said da-da-da-da, and then Ezekiel came and God spoke through Ezekiel and said something else, well, now we have God contradicting himself.
Again, this is an attempt. This is an attempt by the rabbi who wrote this, or the sages who wrote this, to explain what otherwise is a very complex and seemingly discordant examples. One in Exodus 20, which seems to say, that this does pass down. Ezekiel, which says, no, not at all. So they're trying to. That's the way they've come to the solution. It can't be both. It's got to be one or the other, right. and that's where they came to this.
One or the other, or neither. Right. So, yeah, they both can't be right. One is either right and the other is wrong, or they're both wrong. But you're right; it's the best that they can do with the information at hand. So there are other explanations, but honestly, they're not worth reading.
Those are the best two you found in your research.
Oh my word! Well, if you get into the Kabbalah and it's Kabbalic explanations, and your head starts to swim, and it's just painful. All right, so
it's probably just too deep. It's probably just too deep for you.
Yeah, that's what it is. No, there's an explanation that the reason why the children of Israel suffered. Oh man, I can't even begin to get into this. There's one explanation that says that the father of Abraham, Terah, that Job possesses the transmigrated soul of Terah, and that is the reason why he suffers all of this stuff, right? I mean, there's some I'm not even going to go into this one.
Yeah, probably best.
Yeah, and there's all this really wacky sort of, but the point is that there is a desperation to try and solve this problem. Okay, so putting aside the impossible challenge of reconciling the discussed passages, let's turn to the Moses scroll. If you've got it there in front of you, I might get you to read some of that. The interesting thing about it, to start off with is that this caveat is not attached to the first commandment as is represented in the Moses Scroll. It's rather attached to the seventh commandment. So maybe we should begin by reading the first commandment. Just give us that and let us know how it is represented in the Moses Scroll.
Okay, and I have two translations. Remember, we had Edan Dershowitz, who published the book right after mine came out, and of course his is called The Valediction of Moses, a proto-biblical book. And we actually debated some of the translation that I initially came up with, and we adopted something that he came up with in one particular case that I think is important. But anyway, what I have is, this is tied to the commandment, you shall not swear, or to the word of the 10 words, you shall not swear by my name to deceive, because I'm passionate, which we notice that Edan consider that to be a verb. I will avenge, which we both have adopted now. I will avenge the iniquity of fathers upon children unto a third and to a fourth. Now, in my translation, I italicized generation, and that works even in the canonical, in the Masoretic text. The word generation is not even in the text. It's not in Deuteronomy 5. It's not in Exodus 20. It just says to the third and to the fourth. It's, I think, fair to assume that that it is implied in some way, pointing towards the third and fourth. Now, whatever else it means, we'll get to that. But it does seem that you can put it in. I put it in italics. But it is tied to swearing by the name falsely. Now, interestingly enough, in Hebrew, both in the canonical text as well as the Moses Scroll, it's the idea of lifting the name. Nun, Sin, Aleph. Those three letters. And when you see in the canonical text about those who hate me, that has the same three letters, but they're alternated.
Oh, so, that's right.
Remember that? So it's to hate is Sin, Nun, Aleph. Just flip the first two letters.
That was fascinating when I saw that. To lift or to hate, and it's just the same letters, different order. Someone's made a typo, it would appear.
Now, you've done the research on this, but just to kind of wrap up what it says in the Moses Scroll, the basic meaning is whoever lifts the name to deceive. You use God's name to lie. I swear by, and you bring God into a fib, a deception. That's what this is warning against. That's what's saying, don't ever do that. Don't ever use God's name. Don't bring that into the equation.
So if I said, I am a prophet of God, and thus says the Lord, you must wear yellow socks on Tuesday, and that then becomes part of the Torah, then I would be lifting the name to deceive if I'm invoking the name of the God of Israel, to give credibility to my new claim.
That's right.
And if I do such a thing, our initial reading of this seventh commandment, as it appears in the Moses Scroll, the caveat appears. How does it sound there, Ross?
In which part now? Say that again.
The seventh commandment of the Moses Scroll. Yeah.
You shall not swear by my name to deceive, because I will avenge the iniquity of fathers. Or I will avenge the iniquity of fathers upon the children unto a third and a fourth generation for lifting my name to deceive. I am Elohim, your Elohim.
And when I saw that in the Moses Scroll, I thought, oh man, I felt like Job. I thought, God punishes the sons for the sins of the father. Why not let just the person who sins experience it? Why, it just didn't make sense, and there was an uneasiness in my initial reading of that because I had no other point of reference. I automatically, when I read that, and this happens so often and it's natural to do, you gravitate back to your preconceived idea as to what that means. And that's what I did. Now we will get into it. But before we do, just read us then. People are saying, well, then what does the first commandment say in the Moses scroll? Because the first commandment in Exodus and Deuteronomy have this caveat attached to the prohibition against idolatry. Well, then how is it represented in the Moses scroll? How does the first commandment sound?
I am Elohim, your Elohim, who freed you from the land of Egypt, from the slave house, or from, I've got both of them open here. Let me open mine. Let me use the one that I came up with here. I am Elohim, your Elohim, who liberated you from the land of Egypt, from a house of servitude. There shall not be to you other Elohim. You shall not make for yourselves a carved thing or any formed thing that is in the heavens above, or that is on the earth below, or that is in the waters under the earth. You shall not bow down to them, and you shall not serve them. I am Elohim, your Elohim.
So that's the sign off. And just to remind everybody that every single commandment is signed off. I am Elohim, your Elohim.
And you can thereby determine where they end and count them. And guess how many you have? No
10.
doubt, they're 10. Yeah.
There's absolutely 10 because each of them is signed off. And so there it is. There is no caveat saying, and if you do commit idolatry, well, your sons and your grandsons and your great-grandsons are going to pay the price, as if this is some sort of a deterrent. So it's not there, but the caveat is attached to what is the seventh commandment in the Moses scroll. Well, as I mentioned, we were, it just was uneasy. So it was only in the last few months, I suppose, would it be in the last, 5 months or whatever, that it appeared to me to be the opportunity for an alternative reading. And I had to, my Hebrew is not as good as it should be. I had to clarify this with you. I had to clarify it with my Hebrew teacher friend that is often in the library with me. And I had to clarify it with specialists in Israel in ancient biblical Hebrew.
Right.
And everybody came back and said, yeah, you know what? It can say this, and it probably does say this. And let me unpack it so that people understand what it's saying.
All right.
And let me give you I'll just read it again. So this is the seventh commandment as it appears in the Moses scroll. You shall not lift my name to deceive, for I will avenge the iniquity, fathers unto sons, unto grandsons, and unto great-grandsons, for lifting my name to deceive. I am Elohim, your Elohim. So while the mind of one familiar with the Pentateuch may gravitate back to the traditional interpretation of the text, as it did for me.
As I did, as your guy at the library did, as the specialist in Israel at first. We all said, because we're all used to reading it a certain way.
Yeah, that's right. So here's the alternative. The phrase, fathers unto sons, unto grandsons, and unto great-grandsons, does not pertain to the target of Elohim's avengement, but rather is descriptive of the iniquity. All right, let me just say that again, because I know it is. I remember when it really does make the cogs in your brain sort of, how am I supposed to think about this? Let me say it again. The phrase, and think of parenthetical commas, right? Like almost like brackets, but if you put commas on either end of this, the phrase, fathers unto sons, unto grandsons, and unto great-grandsons doesn't pertain to the target of Elohim's avengement. It's not saying that Elohim is going to punish those people, all of those people, the sons and the grandsons and the great-grandsons, but rather it is descriptive of the iniquity. In other words, fathers deceiving impressionable youth is bad enough, but to do so while endorsing the deception with the name of Elohim is an infringement that he ensures he will avenge. This interpretation further concurs with the corresponding blessings and curses allotted to each commandment within the Moses scroll. Now, as we've mentioned many times, the blessings are missing from Deuteronomy and from Exodus. That's just not in the Pentateuch. The blessed bees.
Yeah.
But we do have them in the Moses scroll, and each commandment, which is clearly delineated, has a corresponding blessing and a corresponding curse. It says, for this particular commandment, blessed is the man who does not lift my name to deceive. The corresponding curse, cursed is the man who lifts my name to deceive. Again, specific to the individual. So let me just go back again and say, you shall not lift my name to deceive, for I will avenge the iniquity. For example, fathers who deceive their sons, grandsons, and great-grandsons for lifting my name to deceive. I am Elohim, your God. This is what it's saying. And so really what we see here is that God is saying, I am adamantly opposed to you using my name to deceive people, but especially the fact that you are deceiving your younger generations, your impressionable youth. What do they know when they're young? Except that they should follow their father and listen to them and just assume that what he's saying is true.
And by the way, Jono, sorry to interrupt, but they're also told in this 10 sets that they should give weight to what their father. So here you've got them. Yep. You just told them, give weight to your father and your mother. And then God says, but listen, fathers, if you do this, so that's your point, is that it's even a more grave offense that you would mislead the impressionable children and grandchildren pass that down.
And I tell you what, isn't that what we hear so much about in the news these days, is the misleading of impressionable youth. People know what I'm talking about, but it's a big thing in the news at the moment where so-called educators, people in positions of molding and crafting the minds and thoughts of young school kids into ideologies that are clearly false and dangerous. We all feel it when we see these news items. We're like, leave the kids alone.
Yeah.
Well, God feels the same way about that, clearly. But also, if you do so and invoke the name of God to give it a kosher stamp, he says, I personally, I will avenge that sin. I will avenge that father who misleads using my name. You're not going to get away with that. That's a very, very serious crime. Someone just said on Facebook, accountability for your infringement is a grave responsibility, and Jehovah's specifying the seriousness of it. Quite right. So at this point, Ross, can I get you to read the prohibition that represents this seventh commandment in the Moses Scroll from the canonical text? So what number is that, by the way?
Well, let me look. You're talking about
the one that deals with lifting the name falsely.
Okay, let me go to. We'll start. I guess we'll go to Exodus 20, and let's see. Exodus 20 verse 7 says, "You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain." Now, in the Hebrew, it's lo tisa et shem Yehovah Elohecha. So it's that same. You shall not lift the name of Jehovah your God. Let's see.
But it continues on to say, it too has a caveat. What does it say?
For the Lord will not leave him unpunished who takes his name in vain. So that's pretty similar to what you're suggesting.
It's extremely similar.
Very similar. No, it's extremely
similar. So let me read you another translation, and this is Deuteronomy 5, verse 11. You shall not swear falsely by the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not clear one who swears falsely by his name. So give us a bit more. Just explain that for us a bit more, Ross.
No, I think, and you withheld this from me. I don't remember you telling me this part, but my mind's running because I've always associated this word or this command in the Decalogue, in the canonical text, with what we find in number 7 in the Moses Scroll. It's the idea I've always taught, even before I knew about the Moses Scroll, that the idea of using as we used to say, don't use the Lord's name in vain, or don't say the Lord's name in vain. And as a kid, I had a certain understanding of what that was. I think most people know what that is. People say, well, don't curse using God's name or whatever. Use a cuss word, a bad word, profanity. But really, I've always, as soon as I was able to really study and understand what I was looking at, I always recognized that it has to do with making an oath, associating the name of God with your false oath. So it's sort of a declaration thing. So in this case, this is the corollary. This is the corresponding commandment in the canonical text with what we find in the Moses scroll. And I think that that's interesting, that there is a caveat in here that, like you said, really drills down. God will not clear the person who does this. It is a very, very important message that we need to understand, that that's a high crime here.
Yeah. There is now, I think it was it Charles that brought it up in his comment that we talked about last fortnight. Has there been additions to the text by which the name of God has been used, and that there are deceptions that have been perpetuated using the name? It reminds me of, I'm going to say yes, by the way. Let me just be the one to put it out there. Absolutely. And it reminds me of a verse in Ezekiel it's Ezekiel, right, that talks about the false pen of the scribes. Can you remind me where that is?
Jeremiah.
Where's that?
8. Jeremiah 8:8.
Yes.
Who Go are ahead. We to say that we are wise and the Torah of the Lord is with us, when the lying pen of the scribes has made it into a lie? You know, and there are variations on the translation. People also look at that and they say, well, that can't mean that there's a problem with the text. But it actually, you know, you think about it, Jeremiah, in his day, a scroll was found, which he says that he ate. He said, when your words were found, Jeremiah 15, I ate them, and they were this and they were that. And then remember, Jeremiah criticizes some things that we would think, why would you criticize that? It's in the
such as in chapter 7, just before chapter 8, such as the sacrificial system, Ross.
Yeah, he says, sacrifice and eat your meat, for in the day that I brought your fathers out of the land of Egypt, I never commanded them concerning burnt offerings and sacrifice. But this is what I commanded them, that they would obey my voice, etc. Whenever you read that, you think, how could he say that? Now, look, what people do with that is they go, well, you know how Jeremiah is. He's a little bit, they're trying to find a way out, but he's very, very specific. And when I think about Jeremiah 8:8, when he talks about the lying pen of the scribes, my goodness. And you know, to the topic that we're on, the thing that strikes me is when you get to Jeremiah, when you get to Ezekiel in particular, where it's called a proverb, God is asking through the prophet, where did you get this proverb that
why are you repeating
the father
this
sins and the children pay for it? You know, you would expect everyone who hears that to go, shall not the judge of all the earth just do justice?
Yeah.
You know? Absolutely. So it's a powerful point.
It's a powerful point. And just remind everyone, what was the scroll that was found in the time of Jeremiah?
In the days of Jeremiah, in 622 BCE, the king orders the cleansing of the temple, we might say. And Hilkiah, a priest, goes in and he tells Shaphan the scribe, and ultimately they tell King Josiah, a scroll we found, the scroll of the Torah of Moses. And this sets off a massive reform. 1 Kings chapter 22, 23, 2 Chronicles chapter 34, 35. It's as if they're just now getting the Torah. Where's it been? And it changes everything. And so I was looking at all of that when I came across this story of the Moses scroll, you know, and it's the pieces fit together. You're like, well, wow. Perfectly. So this was such a shocking message, Jono, that they had to change everything they were doing. They hadn't been following the Torah.
In the same way, like I can totally relate to Jeremiah when he says, when I first read your scroll, I devoured it, because this is exactly what you and I did. When we first came across the Moses scroll, we absolutely devoured it for now over a couple of years, I guess. And more than a couple of years, yeah. So
Yeah.
we've been devouring it. We've been fascinated by it, and everything that Jeremiah makes reference to fits, as you just pointed out, fits perfectly with the Moses scroll.
Yeah.
The sacrificial cults, there's no need for sacrifices. If the Moses scroll is in fact the document that it claims to be, the scroll of the Torah of Moses, when you read it, you very quickly realize, well, there's no need for priests. This document does not necessitate priests. When you read the document, you read it, you have to conclude there's no place for sacrifices here. This document does not necessitate sacrifices. Everything is prescribed for it. Everything has its own remedy.
Well, think about this, Jono. If these things are needed and desired, because we're sort of, when people try to live by the Bible, think about it, for at least 2,000 years, the people of the book have lived a life, even trying to adhere to the principles contained within the pages of the Bible. They've had to live a faith that's not biblical in a way. If you think about, what do you need? Think about the sacrificial cult. It's been gone for 2,000 years. Does God need it? We have passages where Hosea 6:6, I desire chesed, velozavak, and not sacrifice. If God wanted sacrifice, we'd be doing it now. It would be, but 2,000 years and you don't? Did he ever want a temple? Did he ask for a temple? No. All of these things, a king like the nations, over and over and over, the monarchy, there's so many things that we find prevalent in the pages of the Bible that simply do not exist and have not existed for 2,000 years. So one has to wonder and ponder, what if what God has done is put us in the place where he has us where he wants us, where the only thing that is left is to seek him with all our heart, our soul, our everything, to come to him, as Hosea said, with the words of our mouth instead of bulls. What if that's what he's driving for? What if it's what he's always wanted? Now, look, people right now are all excited because they have a plane full of red heifers that they just brought to Israel. They're going to put them in 2 locations to protect them. And I understand all that. But let me predict something. I bet you that these cows grow other than red hairs because they'll be disqualified. It happens all the time. I've been following this since the 80s. They'll get a red heifer. They say, oh, this is it. Numbers 19 calls for a red heifer. The text does not call for, you have to take the ashes. This is all later tradition. You have to take the ashes of the old heifer, mix it with the ashes of the new red heifer, put it in Mayim Chaim, in living water, and you mix up this mixture to purify where death has occurred, so then they can purify and so forth. Forget all the political situation and all that. But there are people who are sincere. I'm not making fun.
No, most certainly sincere.
They're seeking to follow a book, which, in my view, what if some of these things weren't part of the original?
What if they have lifted? Honestly, I think that, and I say this as a Levite, I think that priests, the priestly caste, has a lot to answer for. What if they have lifted the name of Elohim to deceive, and it has gone on for generations and generations and generations? Because all you need to do is to brainwash, and we've seen it. Everyone can think of examples of this in real time. Brainwash, the first, the second, the third generation, and all of a sudden it becomes accepted truth. In this regard, so the red heifer. Okay, so you have to take a cow, burn it, take its ashes, mix it with water, and this mixture is the water of purification. This is part of the sacrificial cult. And what it has to, and later tradition, and has now become accepted as truth, is that it must be a particular shade of brownish red, a particular shade. It cannot have more than one white or black hair on its pelt. So they need to go through every single hair with a fine-tooth comb, literally, and a magnifying glass, Ross, to make sure that this red, and they do this in order to bring that sacrificial cult back, to bring back the temple, to bring back the priestly caste, all of these things, that it would appear that God has eliminated from us being able to observe. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't think this is going to happen. But I do believe
if it does, I'm sorry, Jonah. If it does happen, as we read the stories as the biblical period, First Temple, Second Temple, we read through these stories. We as people have a tendency to work on the external elements of religion, and that a lot of times is facilitated through the show of it, the everything. When I think about all the things, you look at Isaiah 66, and that's a pretty stern condemnation on this whole idea of the external elements of religion. The person that sacrifices is going to be like one who broke a dog's neck, the one who, it's really, now people will quickly say, look, God does want sacrifices. He wants them, evidently, he's always wanted them, but he wants your heart to be right. No, how can you make this that idea go with, I desire chesed v'lo zavak, and not sacrifice. I don't desire sacrifices. It's better, this than sacrifice, and the knowledge of God than burnt offerings.
You're frozen.
Shall I approach God?
Oh, yeah.
Shall I give my firstborn? Will you be pleased with thousands of rivers of oil? Shall I do this? Shall I do that? He's told you, oh man, what is good and what does God require? But to do justice, to love loving kindness, and to walk humbly or circumspectly with your God. That's the piece we need to work on, because here's the truth. Even if somebody listens to this and they go, you've lost your mind, Ross. You've totally gone off the deep end. Then I'll say, okay, well, right now then, I'll do like Jeremiah. Jeremiah said, sacrifice and eat flesh. Go ahead. Oh, you can't? You can't. Why can't you? Because you don't have a temple. You don't have the sacrifices. You don't have. You've got to do it this way now anyway. And I propose that it's what God wanted all along.
I'm going to agree with you. I am so thoroughly convinced that the Moses Scroll is an authentic copy of the scroll of the Torah of Moses, that there is remedy supplied within the text that does not necessitate, as I said, a priesthood, doesn't necessitate sacrifice, doesn't necessitate a temple, doesn't necessitate a monarchy. Those four things have gone away, and we don't need them. What we can do is observe and guard the 10 words as they appear in the Moses Scroll. And if you do that, then the text claims that you will be blessed divinely, blessings that are divinely governed. Just by doing those 10 things, you will be blessed. By not doing them, there are curses involved. But there are blessings, divine blessings, that are there to be taken advantage of just by you observing these 10 words. And that's how the society and the world at large is improved. And it begins with the individual. It begins with you doing this. You're not waiting on the Messiah. Oh, let's wait for the Messiah. Let's wait for a man. You're not waiting for the temple to be reinstituted and for animals to be sacrificed left, right, and center. Yeah. All these external things that are going to make it all better for you somehow. No, it's waiting for you. It's waiting for you to be obedient, to do these things, to implement them in your life. And as I said, the document's claim is that in doing that, you will be divinely blessed. Yeah, it's as simple as that. It doesn't necessitate anything else. And this seems to be, it gels very much with with the claims of Jeremiah, whose father, Hilkiah, Dave just said, oh, Dave, Dave just said, can I
think
can
he
I have
means can he
Scribes
eat
again?
shrimp again? Well,
That's a different discussion, and but it is related. I'm not going to get into that right now, Dave. But look. I tell you what, let's address that later on. But it's a valid question. You're absolutely right. Go ahead,
but
Ross.
what I was going to say, if you think about everything that we're dealing with here, I taught a class a couple of weeks ago on what God didn't want. I don't even remember what the title of that class is, but it was basically what I did was I put forward the idea that God never wanted sacrifices, and He doesn't now. That He never wanted the temple, and He doesn't now, and that He never wanted the monarchy, and He doesn't now. And the monarchy is a particularly interesting case because people will say, Deuteronomy 17 says, when you get in the land, you're going to ask like a king, like you're going to ask for a king like the nations, and you may set a king over you like the nations when this happens and this happens. So then you fast forward in history to 1 Samuel 8, and those who've already heard this, I apologize for the repetition, but it's good material. You get to 1 Samuel 8, and sure enough, the people say, hey, Samuel, you're old. Thank you very much, says Samuel. Your boys are bad. You're probably not going to be around much longer. We want a king like the nations. And Samuel is shocked by this. You would think that Samuel would have said, man, I've been waiting on this to come. And here it is. Here we are. Deuteronomy 17 said it would happen. And here it is happening. But he doesn't say that. He says, God, they've rejected me. God says, what do you mean? They said they want a king like the nations. You would think that God would then say, well, Samuel, it says in Deuteronomy 17 that that's going to happen. And here we are. But he doesn't say that. He said, no, they hadn't rejected you. They've rejected me from being their king. And on and on and on. So this story is evidence that makes one think that they didn't know about Deuteronomy 17. You go, well, who didn't know about it? Well, Samuel acts surprised. God doesn't even mention it until 1 Samuel 10:25, when he tells Samuel, give them what they're asking for, but go write that in the scroll and put it before Jehovah. So I propose that this is at least one explanation for how we got the law of the king in the book of Deuteronomy. Yeah. Now, so anyway, but that's one example. But did God want a temple? No. 2 Samuel chapter 7. David says, I'm living in this nice house of cedar and God's living in a tent. Let's make him a house. And God comes, to Nathan and says, go tell my servant David. I'm paraphrasing, but it's 2 Samuel 7. God tells Nathan, go tell David, did I ever ask for a house? I'm going to build you a house. You're going to build me a house? So you get these tensions in the text.
Yeah.
And so the answer is we're almost schizophrenic. We look at this, we look at that, we try to, we make sense of it. Well, am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? We have to be open to understanding what is this that we're seeing here? Is it truly a discrepancy? Is it a problem in the text, Jono? And this is what you've been really digging deeply on. I know you're working on an article at some point on this very subject, and I think it's very much needed. I think it's revolutionary because you have some texts which seem to suggest that the crime that one commits could be transferred to the sons and the sons and the sons' sons. And then you have others that say that's a proverb. Where'd you get this idea? Your solution to that is, wait a minute, maybe we're reading this wrong. Maybe there's something, and then you find it in the scroll.
And once again, the Moses scroll supplies the solution. We were reading it wrong, and we had to really dissect it in the Hebrew to see what it really said. And once again, it just solves the problem. So I'm just going to go back to what Dave Tyler said, and I'm just going to say, yes, question all priestly texts. Let me just say it as bluntly as possible. Question all priestly texts because there's an agenda behind it. And when you read the Moses Scroll, and I know that Dave has really read the Moses Scroll, he knows it well. But for anybody listening to this going, oh my goodness, Jono, what are you saying? Read the Moses Scroll and understand that there is no necessity for sacrifice, for a temple, for a monarchy, for even a priesthood. There are just the 10 words.
Let me jump in. Let me jump in and say, not only if somebody says, I don't care about the Moses Scroll, I got you. Okay, don't read that. Read Jeremiah chapter 7. Read 2 Samuel chapter 7. Read 1 Samuel chapter 8. Listen to the class I did where I'm dealing only with the biblical text. Read Hosea chapter 6:6. Read Hosea chapter 14. Read Isaiah 66. Read Amos chapter 5, verse 24 and 25. Read all of these texts and consider, did God, if he didn't need it then, does he need it now? Or if he needed it then, why doesn't he need it now? Why is it that Second Temple Judaism, with the fall of the Second Temple in 70 CE, why is it that then they had to go to the drawing board? Where do they go? They go to the scriptures. And within the scriptures, they can find a viable, vibrant faith, a worthy biblical faith that doesn't contain a monarchy. How do they do that? Because there are texts which suggest that. How do they find a life beyond living with the temple and the sacrificial cult? Because you have plenty of examples where God says, I don't need it, I never needed it, and get this, I don't want it. I mean, think about where God says, if I were hungry, I wouldn't ask you, you know. I mean, Micah chapter 6 is one of the most powerful passages in all of Scripture to me. And let me read that one time because I've mentioned it a couple of times. But Micah 6, this is one of my favorite passages, and beginning in verse 6, New American Standard. With what shall I come to Jehovah and bow myself before the God on high? Shall I come to him with burnt offerings, with yearling calves? Does the Lord take pleasure in thousands of rams, Jono, in 10,000 rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my wrongdoing, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He's told you, O man, what is good and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love loving kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. And look, right now, if somebody goes, I still want to kill a red heifer. All right, well, you can't do it yet. You know, I still want to sacrifice. Well, you can't do it yet. So right now, everybody's got to go with this method anyway. I mean, that's the bottom line, all right? I mean, what else can you do? Now, the question becomes, you know, people go, well, yeah, but when the temple is rebuilt and, you know, and they go into all these different scenarios. But the question I would have is, that's what they said. You know, Jeremiah in his day, the people were saying basically, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord. And he says, from God, he's supposedly speaking for God in Jeremiah 7. He says, go look at my place in Shiloh. You know, I'll destroy this place just like I did that one. So, you know, what does he really want?
And I'm just in Jeremiah 7 because I just want to read this again. In the same way that, and let me just keep repeating it, the Moses Scroll, the way that it works, does not necessitate these things that we've mentioned. So someone said, do you think that there is a Messiah coming to be king? The Moses Scroll does not necessitate a Messiah.
And I would even take it to the point where I would say, well, that's a whole nother discussion. But even apart from the Moses Scroll, does the Bible put forward the message, the canonical, the Masoretic text, that a singular eschatological figure called the Mashiach, the Messiah, is that what we're to be waiting for? I know a lot of people say, well, absolutely. We have these passages, we have, you know, and people can go through a list of those, and I can too. But maybe we'll do a conversation on, is that what's needed? Are we waiting on a Messiah?
We can do that next week. But this I just want to read this again. So Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 21 and on. Thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, as you've already read this, add your burnt offerings to your other sacrifices and eat meat. For when I freed your fathers from the land of Egypt, I did not speak to them nor command them concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. But it goes on to say, Ross, but this is what I commanded them. And I love this verse. This is now one of my favorite verses because it really does. If you could summarize the message of the Moses Scroll, this is it. It says, this is what I commanded them. Do my bidding, right? My 10 words, do my bidding, that I may be your God and you may be my people. Walk only in the way that I enjoin upon you. Those 10 words, just those.
Yeah.
That it may go well with you, that he may be blessed. Just do these 10 things that it may go well with you. That's all.
What would the world be like? Think about what you see on the news. I mean, I always think about this. What if, I'm just looking at the 10 words. What if the world didn't worship other gods? Now, I could even look at this without the theological aspect, but I like to keep this. I think these are the words of God. But number one is don't make for yourself an idol. Don't have another God. Don't bow down to them. Don't serve them. No other gods. No Elohim Acharim. You can't do that. Sanctify the Shabbat. What if the whole world had a day and every person had the ability to be refreshed and to cease on that day? Not only the person, but the animal as well. There's a lot of abuses that go beyond humanity. Humans are incredibly cruel and hateful to their animals too. They work animals in fields. And what if the animals had a break? What if everything shut down on the seventh day? What would the world be like if the whole world honored their father and their mother, gave weight to their parents, and they weren't abandoning their parents? What if the whole world stopped killing? What if the whole world stopped committing adultery? Destroying families is one of the greatest crimes on the planet. It happens day in and day out all over the world. But theft, larceny, stealing the property of another person, and you go on, swearing to deceive, being deceptive, lying about someone, and raising God's name in the process.
Right. So here's the question, Ross. If that has occurred, and I maintain that it has, if that has occurred, how would you know it now if you're one of the ones who has been deceived? You may not be knowingly perpetuating a deception that involves the name of God. You may have inherited that understanding. And does not Jeremiah say that a time is coming when people will say, hey, hang on a minute, and I'm reading from Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 19. It says, my goodness, O Lord, my strength in my trouble, my refuge in the day of trouble, to you nations shall come from the ends of the earth and say, our fathers inherited lies, utter delusions, deceit, things that are futile and worthless. If that's a possibility, is it possible that we've inherited lies and deceit now? Is it possible that there's an enormous amount of text within the Pentateuch that raises the name to deceive? And you just look at today's politics and understand that the way things are spun and the way that the political game works and how people will spin things for their own benefit, certain movements, certain castes, whatever, certain ideologies to prop themselves up and put them in a better place and subjugate other people under them.
Yeah.
Is it not possible? Jeremiah says that it is possible that nations will come and say, hey, we inherited lies.
Right.
We were deceived by our fathers. We inherited those lies from our fathers. Is it possible that those lies have included the name to give them credibility, to give them a kosher stamp, so to speak? I would say yes.
And I would add to that, we all know it's generally, we like to point at another religion and say, well, that religion does it every day. But usually we find a place where we feel comfortable, and we arrive to a certain place in our theological journey, and we say, "That's it. I've discovered all truth." Not admitting that the place we were at last was the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. We move to the next phase and we go, "I got the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth. I used to be a Baptist, now I'm a Pentecostal. Then I was a Methodist, and then this isn't me, but
Sure.
now I'm a Episcopalian, whatever." And then you say, "Wait a minute, I have a problem with the Apostle Paul, so I don't believe in Pauline Christianity. So what are you now?" "Well, I'm a Hebrew roots person." "Well, but I used to be a Hebrew roots person, but now I'm a Noahide." "Well, but I used to be a Noahide, but now I'm going to convert to Judaism, and I've got the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God." And you go, "But wait a minute. Now I'm going to be Lubavitch. Now I'm going to be," people, and always and at all times, the last right place becomes the wrong place. I mean,
yeah.
And I get the sincerity. Look, I've been on this journey like most people listening to us now. We've all been there. Every place I left brought my poor family along with me. I'm not going there anymore because the guy just said such and such, and he should have used a capital J and he used a Y, and he should have done this. And the guy's serving up pork hot dogs for lunch, and I can't do that anymore. I've been there. But now I'm saying I have the same intensity that I had 35 years ago, and I've been through playing games for 35 years. I want to know. I want to keep digging and searching and finding, because my heart's desire is to serve the one God the way he wants to be served. So if I find places in the text where God says, for instance, "I desire chesed velo zavak," I want loving kindness, not sacrifice. And then I look around me and I go, it is interesting, Jono. It is interesting to say this, that it's been 2,000 years. I mean,
there it is. So
does that
I like to use, I'm with you. I like to use the example of so the Karaites, for example. People know that Karaites do not subscribe to the oral law. Okay, their holy text is the Tanakh, the Torah, the Nevi'im, the Ketuvim. And the Karaites say, we don't do Hanukkah. We don't do it because the Rabbinites claim that God, there was a certain miracle done with the oil and the whole story of the rededication of the temple and so on and so forth. And they say we don't believe that happened, that miracle happened. This is a story that appears 1 or 2 centuries later even, and we will not attach the name of God to what we believe to be a deception. That's their primary. That's their primary problem with Hanukkah. We will not observe something where the name of God is attached to what we believe is a deception, so they don't touch it, and that's fine and good for them. And what we're saying is the same thing, but we're applying it to certain aspects, the sacrificial cult of the Pentateuch. The reason why we're doing that, once again, is that the Moses Scroll, and as you point out, texts within the Pentateuch that argue against these things, but certainly the Moses Scroll does not necessitate these things. And so we will not attach the name of God. We will not raise the name of Elohim to deceive.
That's right.
Has that been done? Have we been deceived? Have we inherited lies from our fathers? Sure. That is the question. That's where we're at. And I absolutely believe that is what the 7th commandment is arguing against in as it's represented in the Moses Scroll.
Well, I think whenever I know that some of these things that we're talking about can be a bit challenging, and you and I have become convinced that the Moses Scroll represent. Interestingly enough, before I ever heard anything, I learned about Shapira's manuscript in December of 2019. A book that someone else wrote about it that Dr. Tabor sent to me and Dave and Patty Tyler and a few others. Hey, check this out. And we jumped in it and I started really working on it. But I had already come up with this idea that if we could recover the actual manuscript that Moses wrote. Like, what did he really write? Because I'd already seen that within Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, where it says, and the Lord spoke to Moses, it says it 800 times in the Pentateuch. It mentions Moses over 800. I think it's 804 times. Check me on that. 804 times Moses is mentioned in a book that he supposedly wrote according to tradition. Now, I had a problem there. I said, wait a minute. He's going to, and so Moses writes about his own death and burial. And when you really start digging in at some of even the traditional scholars and sages over the time, have said, well, okay, he didn't write that. Well, I thought you said he wrote all the Genesis 1:1 through Deuteronomy 34:12. Well, not that. Well, what did he not write? Well, he didn't write the last 12 verses of Deuteronomy. Okay, all right, now we're getting somewhere. You say, well, did he write the part where it says Moses was the meekest man on all the earth? Maybe not that either. But so I'm not questioning whether or not these stories are written by someone close to the time. I don't know. Some of them maybe so. But the question for me initially was, what did Moses write? And when you have this third person stuff, you have things that are anachronistic. We have things in the Pentateuch which were clearly written after the 40 years. I'll give you an example. Exodus chapter 16. In Exodus chapter 16, Jono, they're not even at Sinai. I know you know this. They're not even at Sinai yet. They're not at Horeb. And it says, it's this chapter that's talking about the distribution of the manna. And it tells about the manna. It tasted like this. It looked like this. And the children of Israel ate it. They ate it 40 years, and it didn't cease until they crossed into the land. What? They're not in the land. They're not even at Horeb yet. Whoever wrote that in Exodus chapter 16 is writing at a time after they've already crossed into the land, because they have knowledge that the manna did stop. Well, Moses dies before they cross into the land. So it wasn't Moses. It wasn't written in his time. We have other examples. Deuteronomy chapter 1. These are the words which Moses spoke to all the children of Israel on the other side of the Jordan. Whoever wrote that is on the wrong side of the river. These are the words. Ele hadevarim diber Moshe. So all of these questions made me, and then Deuteronomy 31 says that Moses wrote a scroll to the very end, third person reference. Somebody's telling us Moses finished a scroll. He gave it to the Levites, entrusted it to them, and said, put this mitzad Aaron, put this in the side of the ark for safekeeping. And then we have 3 chapters of Deuteronomy left. So what is that book that he wrote? Deuteronomy 31 says it's called the Torah. So I was looking for a smaller book that was the Torah that Moses wrote. What would it have in it? Probably no third person references. And ultimately, I think we found a document that ticks the boxes.
It really does. And I remember when you were on this journey to really distill what did Moses actually write. And I got on board with you, as people have heard me say before, when I realized in Nehemiah chapter 8, so I think it's Nehemiah chapter 8, right? Where it says that Ezra read the scroll of the Torah of Moses to the people with the Levites offering explanation and understanding from morning until midday. So potentially a maximum of 6 hours did they do this exercise. And there's absolutely no way that you could read Genesis to the end of Deuteronomy within that time span. We know it takes, if you were going to read all of that, it would take at least 28 hours. But they would manage to do it. So that, clearly, whatever is the scroll of the Torah of Moses, a much smaller document than what we've been told. So the Moses scroll once again ticks all the boxes. And I would say to the people, this is the most controversial program we've ever done. And I've done many controversial
that's saying that is really saying
that's
something.
really saying something. But I really do believe that this really is the most controversial program I've ever done. And I would say to the people, return to Moses. It's just the 10 words that God gave to Moses on Horeb, that he spoke audibly to the people at Mount Horeb. The 10 words, and in doing so, there is divine blessing for you that it may go well with you, as it says in Jeremiah chapter 7. that's the message.
It really is. And, this is why I don't respond when a detractor throws something at me like, well, Ross is a Pentecostal or whatever. He's a secret closet Methodist, and we know his dirty tricks. And I'm like, son, you ain't listened to nothing I've done in 8 years, or you'd have something better than that.
Yeah,
so here's the thing. I really encourage people to consider the case, because within the book of the Moses Scroll, the book, there is not only the discussion, and doesn't only contain the text of this scroll in Hebrew and English, but it also builds the case from a biblical perspective as to why would you, like we've had people say to us, who cares about some scroll they discovered? I have the Bible. I'll never forget when I first started studying Hebrew, and somebody asked me, why would you learn Hebrew? They already have it in English. And I'm like, well, I didn't know that. Really? Of course I know that. But the idea that I want to convey to people is we really have some conundrums. We have some complexity within the text. We have tension in the text. We have stories within the story. We have versions, 2 different accounts of various things within the text of the Pentateuch, and they don't agree. We have the story of the spies in the book of Numbers, chapter 13 and 14. We have we have another version of the story in the first chapter of Deuteronomy. They don't agree. Which one of them is right? Now, look, there are people who giggle and laugh and point at the synoptic problems. And, oh, look, the synoptics they don't even disagree. Jesus has a purple robe here and a red robe here, and ha, 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 and those people are stupid. And I want to say, hold up. You want to talk? Let's talk. Let's look at some difficult things.
Apply the same lens and the same scrutiny to
be fair, be consistent.
Be fair. Yeah, absolutely. There are significant problems all the way through. But I am, as I've already said a number of times, I am very pleasantly satisfied with the way that the Moses Scroll consistently solves the problems that scholars have debated regarding the Pentateuch and the Tanakh at large for centuries. That is, I'm going to say that I think we've gone for about an hour and 45 almost. I just want to remind everybody, grab one, get on Amazon, and get a copy of These Are the Words. This is Moses. This is, that is Moses, isn't it? The way that Deuteronomy begins.
Anyway. Look, well, I'm just getting started, Jono. So if you need to go. No, let me just close this from my perspective. No, I do get wound up, and this is fun because you and I have these conversations all the time.
Hey, listen, we can keep going. It's just that I need a bathroom.
No, I wanted to wrap it up. I think we need to wrap it up, but I did want to say this. Look, all my life, I have loved the scriptures, and by that I mean the collection, all of the books. I've loved it. It's been my life's work. It continues to be my life's work. My goal has always been to determine the truth, find God, find in the text, find the text, understand the Bible, read this, read that. Because of that love, because I do believe that Moses really existed, that God really did reveal his way to an assembled group at the foot of a place called Horeb.
Moses wrote a scroll.
That Moses wrote a scroll. That within that scroll were certain things that we know it says are in there. I believe that God gave 10 words on 2 stone tablets. I believe that Moses built an ark. As Deuteronomy says, that God's 10-word tablets go in that ark. Who would not want to know what is written on those 2 stone tablets? And if people say, well, I have the Bible, well, which version is it? Exodus 20, Deuteronomy 5. How about Exodus chapter 34? How about Leviticus 19? Where do we go?
What about the Dead Sea Scroll fragments that represent the 10 words that also are different to the
Nash papyrus?
The Nash Papyrus. What about all of these? They're all different, including the Moses Scroll. Which one would be the most authentic? Maybe the one that's written in Paleo-Hebrew? Oh, maybe the one that's actually in first person all the way through. Maybe the one that is clearly delineated with "I am the Lord, your I am Elohim, your God." Maybe it's the one that also includes the blessings, as Joshua says it does, and that Deuteronomy says it does, but it's just missing from the text. That Sotah 7:5 says once upon a time did actually exist, but we just don't have them. There would have been correlating blessings. Maybe it's that one. Maybe that's the one that answers all the problems, that clarifies all the problems. All these contradictions and problems go away. Maybe that's the one we should be relying on. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm gonna say this one final thing. Look, I have to put this little caption up. If they really want to have some fun, everybody wants to have fun.
There you go. Oh my goodness.
Join us in November. You'll have the two of us side by side, not 24/7, but I don't know what, 19/7 probably, 20. I don't know. It depends. Depends on how interesting you are if you go with us. But we'll stay up. Yeah, we're gonna be all over the land of Israel. We're going to Israel. We're going to Jordan. Mm-hmm. We welcome good debate back and forth. We can take it. We can show. We can debate. We can discuss. Come with us to Israel and Jordan, and I would encourage you, if you've never been, to come with us. And if you've been 100 times, come with us. You've never been on something like
you're going to get something different. Absolutely. So we're going to have some great discussion. We're going to go to some amazing places. We're going to be in Jordan on Mount Nebo overlooking the land and really thinking about Moses. And we're going to be talking about some of this stuff. So sign up. There's still time for you to join. And that is tanakh.com, and we will see you in the Holy Land. Thanks for tuning in, boys and girls, and all the comments. Really appreciate it. We'll be back. We intend to be back this time next week. Until then, have a great one.
Have a great one.